I believe it's time to get started this evening. Holy words long preserved for our walk in this world, they resound with God's own heart. Oh, let the ancient words impart words of life, words of hope. Give us strength, help us cope in this world where we roam. Ancient words will guide us home. Ancient words ever true, changing me and changing you. We have come with open hearts. Oh, let the ancient words impart holy words of our faith, handed down to this age, came to us through sacrifice. Oh, heed the faithful words of Christ. Holy words long preserved for our walk in this world, they resound with God's own heart. Oh, let the ancient words impart ancient words ever true, changing me and changing you. We have come with open hearts. Oh, let the ancient words impart ancient words ever true, changing me and changing you. We have come with open hearts. Oh, let the ancient words impart. Oh, let the ancient words impart. Faith of our fathers living still, in spite of dungeons, fire, and sword. Oh, how our hearts beat high with joy whene'er we hear that glorious word. Faith of our fathers, holy faith, we will be true to thee till death. Our fathers chained in prison dark were still in heart and conscience free. Oh, sweet would be their children's fate if they like them could die for thee. Faith of our fathers, holy faith, we will be true to thee till death. Faith of our fathers we will love, both friend and foe, in all our strife, and preach thee to as love knows how, by kindly words and virtuous life. Faith of our fathers, holy faith, we will be true to scripture reading at this time?
I will be reading 2 Chronicles 16:9. The eyes of the Lord range throughout the earth, strengthen those whose hearts are fully committed to him.
Amen.
It's my privilege to be able to introduce our speaker tonight. His name is Garrett Bernithi. Most of you know who he is. And he has spoken here on a number of occasions. Garrett has a wife, her name is Kristen. They've been married since December of '05. They have 4 sons, Parker, Cohen, Ryder, and Camden. And the oldest one, Parker, is married to Claire. They have a daughter, Tatum. And I know you probably don't think he looks that old. We had this conversation earlier. I told him I have things in my refrigerator older than he is. Garrett has directed and participated in many camps, retreats, conferences, and workshops throughout his career, and now serves on the national staff for Lads to Leaders. He is the president of Excel Stillmore and an annual writer and instructor for Excel Stillmore. That was something we talked about also over dinner tonight. He explained to us what Excel Stillmore is, and it's a very good program and fascinating to hear about. Garrett currently serves as the pulpit minister for the Hydro Church of Christ. Garrett?
When he told me that he had stuff in his refrigerator older than I was, I looked at his wife and I said, "I'm sorry." She said, "Don't worry, we cleaned it out and we moved. It's gone." It's good to be here. I hope that you'll turn with me to Hebrews chapter 11. It's where we're going to start this evening talking about David, as we're continuing on in your summer series of Heroes of the Faith. And this is always a great series to have. I think every congregation needs to have this one. In fact, this is my second one to do like this this summer. I looked at Gideon actually last week in Lindsay, and it's a lot of fun to look at the lives of these people in the book of Hebrews. It really is a fantastic study. If you've never just read or studied Hebrews, I would encourage you to do 2 things. The first one, I would venture to guess that you know what I'm going to say. Read it. The second one is going to be a little bit unorthodox, maybe if you've never done this before. Read it backwards. Read it forward, read it backwards. So just take every verse and then go back. You'll be surprised at how much that helps you. And I would encourage you to try it. If you've never done it, try it. It seems a little weird, but give it a shot and see what it does for you. I'll tell you that when I was told to do that the first time, I told the man who told me to do that he was crazy, and I did it and found out that I was crazy. So give it a shot and see what you think about it. Let's look at Hebrews chapter 12 first, and I want to just start off with verse 1 through 3 in considering Jesus as everything that we need. It says in verse 1, "Therefore, since we have so great a cloud of witnesses surrounding us, let us also lay aside every encumbrance and the sin which so easily entangles us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the author and perfecter of faith, who for the joy set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. For consider him who has endured such hostility by sinners against himself, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart." There's so much that we could unpack from that from these 3 verses, but I will leave it at 1 and let you have the rest. The beginning of verse 3, as we go down and look at David, it says, "For consider him." In all the things that we look at tonight, I want you to consider him in the life of who we're discussing. I want to go backwards a little bit. I want you to look over in Hebrews chapter 11, starting in verse 32, which is really, in my mind, it's a pretty awesome introduction. A lot of times we focus on, in Hebrews chapter 11, most of it that really kind of goes into the life or the situation that somebody went through. But if we're not careful, it's easy to stop in verse 31. I want to read verse 32 through 34. And it says here, "And what more shall I say? For time will fail me if I tell you of Gideon, Barak, Samson, Jephthah, of David and Samuel and the prophets, who by faith conquered kingdoms, performed acts of righteousness, obtained promises, shut the mouths of lions, quenched the power of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, from weakness were made strong, became mighty in war, and put foreign armies to flight." That's a pretty awesome section in discussing all of those individuals, which includes our main topic tonight, which is David. David is an extremely important man. He was important to the Jewish people. He was important to the Israelite people, obviously during and post his reign. And he's important to us. In fact, I would say in some way he's just as important to us as he was to them. And so even if you went over there to the Bible lands today, if you were to mention King David, he would be held in a very high regard. And I think that he should in our minds as well. We're thinking about faith and lessons learned, and that's kind of what I want to focus on tonight. Typically, if we talk about David, we go to the main story, which would be what? David fights who? Goliath. Man, what an awesome story that is. We're not going to touch that story tonight. That's an awesome story. But I don't look at David's fight against Goliath as the true trial of his life if we're looking at lessons learned. I think that was a true demonstration of the king that the Israelite nation needed. Remember when King Saul came into power, he was a coward. He was the one hiding in luggage whenever they tried to put him up to be king. But really, whenever you look at King Saul, he was the people's king. He was this idol-like figure that the people wanted. And that is, of course, resulting from the nations around them who were idol worshipers. There's so much history that we could go into to getting and developing that out. But that's essentially what King Saul was. He was the king that they wanted to have because it kind of finished out this picture of who they thought they should be. But when David comes on the scene, you have Saul, again, the coward, along with all of his army, and he's going up against the Philistines. And who are they afraid of? They're not afraid of the Philistines. They're afraid of one man. He was a pretty big guy. I would probably be a little bit afraid of him too. But that's what it was. They were afraid of one man. God, if they would have remembered what he had done for them, he delivered them out from the major dynasty of the day of Egypt, and they crossed the Red Sea, which was a feat nobody could have accomplished. They did so on dry ground. Joshua, after 40 years of conquest, would take them in, and they would take the untakeable city, which is Jericho, where God would tear the walls down, and they would take the city. And there's a whole list of kings, I believe it's 32 kings that Israel overtook to go into the land. God is the one who did that for them. He led them. He was king, he was ruler, he was military force, He was all that stuff for them. But as Joshua would die, they didn't have the leadership that they thought they needed. And that's when we enter into the time of the judges, because the partial conquest of the land had left the nation of Israel with some pretty tough temptations ahead of them. If you remember Deuteronomy chapter 7, God told them they need to drive everybody out, destroy them all, wipe them out. This is your land, nobody else's. Well, they didn't do that. During the time of the judges, we have the people who continue to go away from God, and they would sin. And a result of that sin would be they would put into the hands of oppression. And there was a vicious cycle that went on. Well, by the time the kings got there, they thought if they had a king like everybody else, they wouldn't have to worry about those things anymore. And so God gave them their king. But our first entrance of David into the story, well, not the first, but the first beginning of his life, beginning of our reading about him, I should say, we see a person who is very strong in his faith. Very strong in his faith. In fact, if you're writing notes, I hope that you'll put that down there. He was very strong in his faith. Now, we look at the story of David and Goliath as a person who was mighty in war, and he relied on God to overcome these great obstacles, these great objects, these great armies, because David was a great military leader. There's no getting around that. But I would tell you, or in my estimation, as I have thought and prayed and studied about the life of David, and I have much more to do, David was, how I see this, David was never in danger of other people or from other nations. What was David's greatest danger? It was himself. So when we think about the great lessons and trials from the life of David, it is not Goliath. Although pretty awesome, right? It is not his other military battles. It is not becoming king. It is one story that we probably all know very well, and we'll get into that. Now, as we begin, there are two things that have generally been true since the fall of man. Two requirements for salvation to happen, and that is faith and grace. Okay? Faith and grace. If we're thinking about this from our perspective as we keep Jesus in our eyes and we're considering Him, when a person has faith and he or she responds to God's grace, this is when righteousness occurs. For every Christian, for every person who's ever lived, righteousness is the goal that we are striving for. I don't know if I'm beeping or... That is the goal that we're striving for. And I want you to think about Hebrews chapter 11, verse 1.